Hi folks, this video is going out primarily to one of my patrons, Celestial Lawnmower, who asked a question, but it will also be of interest to anyone else who is curious about magic, in particular greater magic or things of a psychic nature. He asks, okay, hi Darrell, in your videos you often speak about there being a single consciousness which is focused into many focal points of limited awareness. Would it be possible for someone to create a focal point of limited awareness? I'm not talking about having children, breeding animals or plants. What I mean is creating some sort of consciousness focusing mechanism comprised of objects or components which we do not think of as being alive. Things such as physical materials, energy, etc. Strong AI. On the internet there are many videos and written accounts of people attempting to summon what they perceive to be spirits, ghosts, etc. using rituals of varying complexity. I'm reminded of some of the rituals from the Western mystical tradition. I have no idea if any of these rituals actually work or not, but could it be said that these rituals are designed to artificially create a focal point of limited awareness for a limited period of time? The limited focal point of awareness being the summoned ghost / spirit, etc. Anyway, just some food for thought. Yeah. Keep up the good work with your videos, by the way. Thanks. Okay, so we're getting into a sort of a taboo topic. I guess I'll decide after I make this whether I want to make it as a Patreon only video or whether I just put it on general release. I feel that tightening of the chest that I feel these days whenever I make videos about taboo topics. Yeah, well, taboo for some people. I guess there's a certain segment of the audience will consider the subject of magic to be dangerous and something to do with the devil. Other people will consider it laughable. So I've got a lot of people against me on this one, but I guess my general audience, those who are subscribed to me, many of you will have some interest in this sort of subject. So, we're talking about magic and the use of magical ritual to create a focal point of consciousness, whether that's going on or not. Right, okay, let me backtrack a little bit and I want to give you my theory of what consciousness is, at least as far as we can explain it. And we're going to really explain it by narrowing down what it's not. And that'll give us a handle on kind of where we need to go from there. Anyway, most people tend to inherit a view of consciousness that we call Cartesian dualism. That's the technical term for it. You could call it mind-body dualism, or you could call it spirit-matter dualism. It's the idea that there's a material realm, what we see all around us, and there's a mental, or if you like, spiritual realm, which is entirely separate from that. We inherit that through our religious traditions. But it's funny, and if you're an atheist but you're not a philosophically inclined atheist, this may not even be something you've thought of before, that you might actually be a Cartesian dualist without realizing it. If you feel a sense of alienation, a sense of being this separate thing from the universe that kind of gets you depressed from time to time because you're fighting against, you know, oblivion. If you have those kinds of feelings, you're probably a Cartesian dualist. So you may want to listen up, because there's another way to look at things. Cartesian dualism is definitely wrong. Okay, what do I mean by this? Okay, it's fairly understandable why people took this view, because we see the arena of objects in space around us. It's quite real to us. But then we also have this ability to turn our attention towards, if you like, for the sake of a better term, the world inside our heads. this subjective universe that we experience, as something that is not localized in space. Because we could ask the question, where is it? We have this rich internal landscape that we can focus upon our memories. We can imagine things that we'd like to happen. We can go on outrageous flights of fancy, but we have this internal landscape that feels, what do we call it, mind space or something. It feels like it's something large and significant. But if we're a materialist in our understanding, if we think that ultimate reality just consists of matter, we have to ask the question, where does this mind space exist? So you'd have to kind of, if you really were a strict materialist, you'd have to say, well, we just go down and down and down, and it has to exist inside a molecule somewhere inside the brain. And that feels like a very weird way to explain consciousness, to explain subjective experience. Well, what molecule is it? You know, we have to conclude that it's real, but it is not localized in space. There is a feeling that it exists spatially inside the head, because we have a perception of peering out from two eyes, right? We have a perception of this being a thing, this creature being a thing. So we think consciousness must be in here somewhere, but when you look for the material basis of it, you can't find it. So historically, we've concluded there is matter, there is mind. That's Cartesian dualism. They're two separate things, two separate aspects of reality, and we don't quite know how they're joined, but they are, and we treat them as entirely separate things. Right. Now, the reason why that view can no longer be supported rationally is because we know that if we damage the brain, we damage the mind space. You see? You don't even have to damage your brain, you know, if you simply take a cup of coffee. Suddenly the mind space is stimulated. You see? If you take a lot of alcohol, the mind space is stimulated in a totally different way. So, matter affects mind. So, yeah, right? This kind of means that you can't really take a position philosophically called idealism. Now, idealism means that mind is the primary reality and matter is a secondary consideration. Matter exists only as an experience of mind, and matter is not fundamentally real. Mind is. Now, the reason why you can't really take that position is because it would appear that there were planets before there were minds inside bodies on these planets. You know what I mean? The planet had to come first before the creature, and it's the creature that carries the mind. You see? You'd have to come up with some very weird and convoluted view of time to try and get around that problem. So it really does look like materialism trumps idealism. But yet materialism is still faced with the problem of explaining the existence of mind, right? And it can't explain it materialistically because it's not localized in space. It can be affected by matter, but it is not localized in the material sense. So taking all that into consideration, where does that actually leave us? And the only position that makes any sense to me is technically known as neutral monism. Monism being everything's one. Neutral meaning we don't take one side or the other. So it's kind of like saying, although everything is material, all material holds the potential for mind in the primordial sense, right? It's like saying this here object, I hate using this because it's a man-made object. I wish if I had a rock in my hand or something, it would have been better. But, you know, pretend that's a rock. It's like saying this is consciousness in potential. Everything is consciousness in potential. If you ever read the works of Dean Radin, who's a parapsychologist, he takes the view that reality is what might be called field consciousness. Like it's all interconnected, fuzzy consciousness in potential, but only under certain very strict conditions does that consciousness come together in a way that allows it to focus itself, right? And then we have minds. So the one place that we know that consciousness does focus itself is with organic matter, right? So it's like saying when those first cells came together in the ocean all those eons ago, that was the beginnings of this unfocused field of consciousness gradually finding focus. And then it replicated and it mutated and it came into focus just a tiny bit more until eventually we had the vast complex minds that we have today. Right? So another view, another word that you can use for this view is panpsychism. Pan meaning all, psyche meaning mind. Everything is mind. Now that sounds like idealism. I'm not entirely certain what the difference in those terms is, but I like the term panpsychism because I think it's a better term than pantheism, which you've heard me mention in the past. Don't really like the term idealism because it sets itself against matter. Materialism versus idealism, neither side can really win, but neutrality wins. If you simply say, it's a bit like saying all matter is potentially conscious and all consciousness is an experience of the material. You can't really have consciousness without a sense of what you're conscious of, so it's going to be material in nature, which is just another way of saying it's going to be tangible in nature. If there were a spirit realm populated by beings, then they're having an experience of matter in the spirit verse. Their spirit verse is their material realm, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like saying, you don't need a spirit world because you're in it already. This is the spirit world. You see? And it does seem to be possible to get psychic or magical effects to happen right here in the material universe. So if you were a Setian, if you were involved with the Temple of Set, they have the terms the objective universe and the subjective universe, which they abbreviate to the OU and the SU. I think those are pretty good terms. I've also heard it referred to as outer space and inner space. It's essentially what you heard me before referring to as mind space. So in Setian philosophy, the idea is that the subjective universe can affect the objective universe through the establishing of a magical link. What is that magical link? Well, it seems to be the use of altered states of consciousness to kind of change the focal setting so that there is a kind of blurring between mind space and real space. And that occurs. That's a fairly good description of what I go through mentally when I try to attempt psychokinesis. You get into that kind of strange, unfocused state. Somebody once referred to it as focused inattention. And that's a weird sounding term, but it's apt. Focused inattention. It's kind of like you're focused, you're really focused hard on focusing on nothing. It's strange. And then that's when the magic happens. And it's very limited in scope because it appears to work with the laws of physics. you can't do anything with it without the available energy that allows you to do something with it. So well, that's why I can't levitate anything. And I'm so out of practice with psychokinesis from the old days. I mean, all I could ever do was move a side wheel, and I could get it to move occasionally under a glass bowl, but rarely, but occasionally. And there were bodily sensations and mental sensations to accompany this. Now the question you're asking is, are we creating an artificial point of consciousness in order to achieve a magical effect? You could think about it that way, but you'd be imposing a mythological understanding on what's happening. And what's happening is, I don't know. That's the honest truth of it. And it's very hard to know because we're dealing with something deeply abstract. It certainly involves consciousness, but it feels more to me like a blurring of the focus of one's mind so that it bleeds out into the material realm in a way that it's not normally supposed to. That's more what it feels like to me. The concept that you're describing reminds me of what's called a servitor, which I think I read about in Chaos Magic. Chaos Magic has a useful catchphrase, which is, what is it again? Nothing is true, everything is permitted. And what that means is you can use whatever theory you want as long as you get the results. It doesn't have to be true in order to work. It just has to make sense. You see? I'm kind of reminded of the old story about, it's from Native America, where the son asks the father, I'll have to remember this correctly now. The son's talking to the father about how difficult it is to be good. And the father explains it to him by saying there are two wolves inside of you. And there's a good wolf and a bad wolf, and they're at war with each other. And the son asks which one wins, and the father says the one that you feed. Now, you know that there really aren't two wolves inside you, but you can also see how this mythological approximation of the psychology actually makes sense. So if you have a negative habit, if you feed that bad habit that you know is destructive, it will gain power over you, you know. So that's a more stale way of saying what the Native American father said to his son in mythic terms. So when you say, are we creating an artificial point of consciousness? You're inventing a mythic description of what might be happening. Okay? We don't know what's happening. And that's the bottom line. All we can really do is sort of get a handle on the technique that allows you to make something happen, the kind of strange mental state you have to put yourself in. In Chaos Magic they talk about inhibitory and excitatory states of consciousness. The one that I have used is what you would call the inhibitory one, which is that focused inattention, kind of like a meditative state. The daydream state is also applicable here. The other one, excitatory, is the state of over-the-top emotion, whether it's fear, whether it's sexual arousal, whether it's anger. That seems to be the other key that allows a magical effect to work. Don't have much experience with that, as I'm somewhat introverted maybe, but yeah. The common denominator between those two states of consciousness is that they get you to switch off the discerning, thinking mind, and they get you to act in an unconscious, driven manner while remaining conscious, if that makes any sense. The rationalizing mind is the thing that prevents psychic or magical effects from occurring. And I'm just saying that that's my experience of the matter. Yeah. There was a guy called Sean Connolly who wrote the Scion's Handbook, and he said all techniques are BS. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what he said there. Emotion is the key. Emotion is the currency of willpower. If you look on YouTube for a video called The Greatest Secret of Psionics, that's spelled Psionics, give it a listen. I think he's really on to something there in the things he says in that particular video. It's a very old video now. It came out back in the days when I was making psychokinesis videos all those years ago. Yeah, I think this is going to be a Patreon only video, folks. It's too bizarre. And I think these sorts of subjects are better for a closed audience. Yeah. So I don't know if I've offered any clarity for you there. In a very long-winded way, I've kind of basically said we don't know what's going on. But yeah, I would be confident that magic occurs purely because of my successful experiments into psychokinesis. That's about the only proof I have, personal proof, that there's a reality to ritual magic. And I see a strong crossover between ritual magic techniques and with what I was doing to produce a psychic effect. Yeah. So whatever magical system you prefer, I think the idea is they're all pretty much as good as each other. The thing about it that matters is that it gets you to alter your state of consciousness in a manner that allows something unusual to happen. Yeah. Are we actually creating another sentient being? Another focal point of consciousness? Personally, I don't think that's what it is. But I just don't know what it is. Alright. So anyway, I've been meaning to make a video on magical theory because we've talked about lesser magic. I wanted to make one on greater magic. So Celestial Lawnmower, your question provided a good springboard for that for me, and hope you found it interesting. Alright folks, thanks for your continued support, and I'll talk to you later.